Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute since we've talked Lorcana. I really don't use this channel a whole lot, but something I wanted to talk about was Lorcana at Gencon 2025, and specifically my experience playing Reign of Jafar Sealed, where I was fortunate enough to go 2-0 in the bonus event and take home the 2025 exclusive playmat. So before I get into talking about the format and stuff like that, Gencon obviously was a lot of fun. Obtaining the playmat was a goal I had going into it. I'm usually not a big playmat person, but I'm a sucker for event exclusives. Played a lot of core constructed, a lot of limited formats like Sealed, and started at Chaos, but ultimately Reign of Jafar Sealed is what was able to allow me to bring home the playmat. So very happy, was over the moon, was smiling the entire drive home that night. Yeah, all in all, a really great convention. Also wanted to mention just the kind of the haul in general. You know, the promos were aplenty at Gen Con. Walked away with a handful of Goofies and Annas and Rapunzels and Plutos. The Enchanted Jasmine actually came from my reward packs, but I haven't done exact math on how many packs I opened, but my rough math include Reign of Jafar Sealed is about a booster box equivalent of Reign of Jafar. So all in all, Gen Con, fantastic convention, my first time going. Lorcana had a really great presence. They had a lot of goodies for everybody, no matter who you are. If you are a more competitive player or a more casual player, there were opportunities to take home a lot of goodies and promos along the way. So let's talk Sealed, shall we? Sealed is probably my favorite format. Now, inside Gen Con, they did have a variety of sealed events. They had the first chapter sealed, they had Reign of Jafar sealed, that's what I did in this case, and just like any other sealed event, you pay into the event and you will receive a total of 6 packs at random. Now, there is a 40 card deck minimum. In this case, I ran 41, and there are no ink restrictions. So you can effectively open up all 6 packs and play with everything, but generally 40 cards is what folks like to stick with whenever it comes to sealed. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, you're about to give us a deck profile about Reign of Jafar Sealed whenever we're a month out from Fabled, and I'm not gonna be able to recreate this card by card. Well, that's true, but while I talk through the deck, I want to talk about some of my kind of the mindset in which I handle sealed and what I look for as sealed events take place with set releases. That's my local game shop's release party method of choice, format of choice, and I wanted to talk about how I handle sealed, and maybe it's some ideas and some thoughts that you can take to your next sealed event. Am I by any means a pro at sealed or a pro at core constructed? Absolutely not. But I like to think that I had a pretty good mindset going into this, especially considering the picks that I had wasn't feeling too good as I was opening up these packs. But let's go ahead and take a look at the deck here, and I'll kind of talk through everything as we go. But here, this deck is on Dreamborn. I went ahead and posted it. You know, maybe you're discovering this video from there, or vice versa. But typically in Sealed, I have a few fundamentals. I usually try to have a pretty good curve, topping out around the 3 or 4 ink cost mark. And then I also like to have a very healthy population of character glimmers. Ultimately, in Sealed, your objective is 20 lore. You're not trying to make cut, you're trying to get to 20, especially in these events where a certain record of 3-0 or 2-0 is needed to take home a playmat, for example. Getting to 20 should be your primary objective. Also, generally speaking, I typically like to have all the cards in my sealed deck stand on their own. To quote a YouTube channel I'll talk about in just a little bit, Nives Nerd Corner, there is no shame in picking a card because you like the art or just because you like it or its ability. But generally, I try to think about the objective of 20 lore. I like to have all of my cards stand on their own. But as we get into the 1-drops here, I'll kind of talk my head through this. And I want to preface this by saying I had a lot of really core pieces in this deck, but I didn't have a whole lot of other things that I was hoping to get, like Thumper, for example. I believe I just had a handful of rares or super rares inside this deck. So majority of the deck was common and uncommon cards. But let's break down the 1-drops here. I'm going to start a little bit backwards here. I'm going to do Dump Truck. Dump Truck, was an auto add in my opinion. Now you might look at this card going, okay, you can play him, he does absolutely nothing other than questing for 1 and pings 1 damage to a character. Well, inside this format, you have something like Vanellope that is a 3/1 evasive. Dump Truck was an auto add. Also, Dump Truck will help you shut down other characters like Rhino that gets resist. Well, I guess he wouldn't really resist that, but it would help you do things like Pluto, I think would be a better example, where having damage on Pluto will shut down the support and the strength bonus that cards like Pluto will get. So Dump Truck was an auto add. Being able to ping 1 damage to something, especially in a format where the 1-drops are relatively weak, to me was an auto add. The second one being the reprinted Captain Hook, the 1/2 quest for 1 with Challenger 2. This was an auto add, just being able to keep this ready and basically threaten down any sort of exerted character of your opponents was pretty critical. This was an auto add. I just had 2 Dump Trucks and 1 Captain Hook in this deck. The Rhino I kind of threw in here because I was kind of running low on 1-drop character glimmers, and the Rhino ability gives a character -1 until the start of your next turn. Really didn't use this ability for anything. It was just more so to establish a body on board. And lastly being Gene, the Iceland resident, the 1-cost 1/2 quest for 1. Whenever this character quests, you remove 2 damage from chosen character. Really didn't get a chance to use this ability. That's just where I was with the 1-drops. Now, unfortunately, you won't be able to see the characters I didn't pick, but I hate to say, just trust me, but yeah, the picks were kind of slim. I was not feeling great. I was opening these packs. We'll talk about the 1-drop actions, but in terms of 1-drops, I have a total of 5 1-drops here. 5 1-drop characters, rather, inside the sealed deck. Getting into the 2-drops, the Gym Deer, boom, auto add. Bodyguard, fantastic. Bodyguard is critical in sealed in my opinion. In this case, it's a beefier bodyguard but doesn't do any damage in return. Being able to keep something like Rhino or Dump Truck or something like that ready, or protected rather, was pretty valuable. And it actually does require a pretty good answer in order for your opponent to take it out. So Gym Deer was great, allowed me to quest with a couple glimmers before ultimately getting threatened by not only the bodyguard being taken out, but also the other 1-drops. So any sort of bodyguard to me is an auto add, especially this low in the curve. I have one of the Bambis here. Now Bambi was just primarily for a stat line. Are there better 2-drops? Yes, but was looking at this, I was like, okay, cool. I like the ink. I like that it's inkable. I like it's a 3/2. At least it'll be able to hit something moderately pretty heavy before getting banished. So picked Bambi primarily for the stat line. Next up being Nero, the Fearsome Crocodile. 2-cost uninkable, 2/3 quests for 1, but you can exert this character to move 1 damage counter from this character to chosen opposing character. So that actually works out pretty well. It allows you to shut down things like Pluto and Rhino because resist bypasses, the moving damage bypasses resist. So that's actually pretty beneficial. So being able to shut down those characters that get a bonus by having no damage was pretty beneficial in this format. Next up being Tipo. Now, I mentioned earlier inside the video, I have 2 Tipos here, that I generally like to have characters that can stand on their own. The exception here was Tipo and I believe Chaka is how you say the name. So I have 2 Tipos here. Evasives are an auto add. Evasives require an answer, whether it be pinging damage or something like that. So Tipo was critical here. 2 Tipos here. Vanellope Von Sweets. 2-drop, inkable, 3/1 with evasive. 1, it's evasive, so it's an auto add, but 2, also hit for a lot. Now, this character usually didn't hang out on board a whole lot. It typically hung out for at least until I exerted it or something like that. It just allowed me to threaten any sort of pretty big answers here. So, all right, 2-drop Prince Ahmed. No idea why he's in here. I just needed more inkable 2-drops, and this is the best one that I could find that kind of stood on its own without having a necessary combo. So it was kind of rough in the 2-drops as well, but went ahead and threw him in. Next up, moving on to the 3 drops, is the Madam Mim 4/3, primarily for the stat line. One of the stat line, it was pretty fantastic. So Madam Mim, no other reason other than a pretty aggressive stat line on turn 3. She really didn't see a whole lot of play. Turn 3, Yolana. Again, apologies if I'm saying this incorrectly, but Yolana, when you play this character, it gives chosen character Challenger +2, questing for 2, Chef's Kiss. Removal was very hard inside this format, especially in Reign of Jafar. We had very limited removal. You had Light the Fuse, which we'll talk about. You had Get Out, which is an action. And then you have Rush. Rush is also very limited inside Reign of Jafar. So being able to beef up something like a Tipo, that was a 2/2, or something of that nature, yeah, it was pretty powerful inside this format. She was able to at least hang around for 1 turn, and you can still quest for 2. So being able to beef something up, give it Challenger 2, was pretty awesome. Even a Captain Hook, if he was still around, giving him essentially hitting for 5 strength was pretty powerful. Archimedes. Archimedes was a little bit of a wishy-washy pick. I went back and forth with him. Archimedes for 2 reasons. 1, he quested for 2. And 2, in the event that my opponent had something like a hamster ball, which was an item that gives a character +2 resist, I wanted to be able to get rid of it. So Archimedes, primarily for the questing here, but also I did want some sort of item insurance in the event that hamster ball did come into play. I know that Minnie Mouse Bodyguard with hamster ball was very critical. So Archimedes was item insurance. Next up being Dawn Carnage, evasive 3/2. Now, the ability was really fun in this one. 1, it's evasive, so it was an auto add, but 2 is whenever you play an action that isn't a song, chosen opposing character gains Reckless during their next turn. Being able to prevent your opponent from questing is legit. Being able to prevent them from questing is important, but the downside to this is they get Reckless. So you need to be careful with what you exert because they do have to challenge if they are able. So the way that I handle Reckless and Sealed is that I typically don't like to turn anything else sideways unless I know it's going to banish the challenging character and my character remains, or at minimum it's gonna be a trade for a high value target. So that is the way I handle Reckless here. I was running 3 actions inside this deck that were not a song, so I was actually able to resolve this Scornful Taunt ability quite frequently. So evasive, auto add, but the ability was actually kind of clutch here. Let's see here, where are we? The Gloyd Orange Boar, 1 of. Whenever you play this character, each opponent loses the lore and you gain 1 lore. I had 2 in the packs that I pulled, however, this was pretty cool because it allowed you to kind of widen the gap just a little bit. I'm pretty sure I only played him once, so I was able to kind of widen that gap a little bit. Maybe my opponent was at 2 lore, now they're at 1, but now I'm at 3. Kind of go back and forth with that. Let's see here, Mushu next up in our 3 drop. So again, just like I mentioned, Rush was pretty hard inside this format. So there's only 2 things that give Rush. You have the 8 drop Monstro, the Amethyst Monstro with Rush, 2 expensive for Sealed, 2 expensive for Limited, and Mushu. So Mushu requires a little bit of setup. I really didn't get to use the Rush ability here. You have to exert him to use the Let's Get the Show on the Road ability, but in theory, you are playing Mushu on turn whatever, and then you pass, it comes back to you, Mushu is ready, you play a wet character, you can exert Mushu to give that character Rush. So that was the primary setup here. It is important to note that it did take setup. Rush in this format, in this set, looked a little differently than others, but didn't really get to use this ability, but he was just kind of a good body to have on board. Sir Pellinor. This was my 41st card. This is my 41st card, primarily for failing, which I'll talk about in a few moments. But basically, whenever this character quested, all your other characters gain support, which is where if they quest, they can give their strength to another character. Keep this in the back of your mind because this was pretty critical. This was my 41st card at the very last minute. Genie, one of. Beefy boy. A 3/4 with evasive. So keep in mind, evasive characters are powerful in any sort of limited format, but if you even at least have something that gains evasive during your turn, that is pretty powerful. So Genie getting evasive, he was able to take out a Vanellope Von Sweet, something like that. All in all, any sort of beefy body like this, probably one of the best cards that I pulled and had inside this deck, so I was pretty happy with that. Still inside the 3 drops, moving downtown, we got Vinny. Vinny was an auto add for me, primarily for his learning experience ability. During an opponent's turn, whenever one of your other characters is banished, you gain 1 lore. I played Vinny, I kept him ready. Sure, challenge my stuff, take out my stuff, I will continue to gain lore. I only really quested with Vinny if I knew he was safe, so just playing Vinny, keeping him ready, gaining lore whenever your characters are banished, was pretty valuable inside this format. Zipper, not for the best mates ability, but primarily for the burst of speed ability, which during this turn, this character gains evasive. So this is just another evasive insurance here. Allowed me to take out things like Vanellope or any other evasives that might pop up. So that was pretty cool. And again, thinking back to what I mentioned earlier, I like to have my cards stand on their own. So the best mates ability really wasn't the reason I added this. It was the burst of speed ability where this character got evasive. So pretty good answer. Really didn't see a whole lot of him. I think he was more ink than anything, but at least I had another ability like the Genie there if I needed it. Let's see here. Dewey, one of 4/4, 4-drop, quest for 1. Stat line. no other reason, just stat line. If I needed something to play on turn 4, if it wasn't one of my other more preferred cards, that's why I added Dewey in here. So primarily for the stat line, I don't think I played him once. Bruno, getting to the 4-drops here. There's one more powerful 4-drop I do want to mention. Bruno Madrigal, single-minded, 3 strength, 4 willpower, standing tall ability. When you play this character, chosen opposing character can't ready at the start of their next turn. Being able to prevent your opponent from readying characters is valuable. So this allowed me to play Bruno at very critical moments in the game where they maybe had a very high quester that was exerted. At least be able to stall that out to where I could get ahead in lore, or I had something coming up that would still have that opposing character exerted, then I could then do some damage and trade into with either that character, with Bruno, or a combination of other characters. Being able to prevent your opponent from questing is insane. It is valuable, especially if you go to time and you get to end of round procedures. Let's see here. So a lot of 4-drops here. Chaka, again, I feel like I'm saying that incorrectly, but 2 Chakas here where you have the In Cahoots ability. When you play this character, if you have a character named Tipo in play, chosen opposing character gains Reckless during their next turn. So, again, I want my characters to stand on their own. The only reason why I ran 2 Tipos and 2 Chakas is because I had 2 Tipos and 2 of this card. So, to me, having a total of 4 cards that worked off each other, they were okay on their own. I would have liked to not play this card if Tipo wasn't in play, but again, being able to give a character Reckless was very valuable. So I actually did pull this off a handful of times, and it was actually kind of fun to do. So pretty cool combination. Again, I try to lean away from combos and sealed, but in this case, it pulled off. Go-Go Tamago, the next one of, primarily for the evasive ability, not for the 0 resistance. I had no way to shift her, but the evasive ability, questing for 2, evasive, decent stat line. It was an auto add because it was evasive. Napoleon, primarily for the stat line. Needed more inkables, and a lot of these vanilla cards that you see here are primarily because I needed to add in a additional character of some nature. I needed to reduce my inkable count, so that is why I looked at Napoleon. I needed more inkable characters. Brutus, during your turn, when this character is banished, if one of your characters was damaged this turn, gain 2 lore. I never got to pull this off with Brutus. Never got the opportunity to, but if I was able to challenge something and, you know, take some damage and then trade something with Brutus, I can gain 2 lore. So again, pretty good hitting for 4, but didn't really get a chance to attempt to pull this off. Falling, MVP of the deck. I just had 1, unfortunately. So Failing single-handedly won me both my matches. So Failing being a 2/4 with evasive with the ability, when you have a character in play with more strength than each opposing character, this character gets +2 lore. So if you have a character in play that has more strength than any of your opponent's characters, Failing is questing for a total of 3. That is so strong. Now, your opponent can answer this for as long as they have something with more strength than any of your other characters. But if we go back to one of my picks, the 41st card in the deck, last minute, being able to give everything else support to kind of stack that support and move the strength from character to character to resolve Failing, that was pretty important to me. So as we get into my last 4-drop and into my 5, 6, 7 cost characters, you will understand why this character is so important. But Failing, Chef's Kiss, one of my favorite cards in sealed format. Just being able to quest for 3, it's hard to answer. It's hard to answer. There are answers, but if you can't stop it, you will quickly start to run away with the game. So, Arthur, by far the most controversial pick in the entire deck. 4-cost inkable, 6 strength, 6 willpower, questing for 3 with the ability no more books. Whenever this character is in play, you skip your turn's draw step. Pretty powerful trade-off. You have a 6/6 body questing for 3, but you can no longer draw cards. This was the Hail Mary. This was the Hail Mary in the deck. This is something that I talked about with other people. This is something I talked about with Dylan. I was like, do I go the Arthur route? And ultimately the reason why I went the Arthur route is because I felt like I was missing a lot of other really neat pieces, like Thumper being able to give something additional strength. I felt like I was missing a lot of multiples of Failing, for example. So this was the Hail Mary. Now, that being said, did I accidentally draw on my draw step whenever he was in play? Yes, but fortunately my opponent pointed it out. Luckily, I had just drawn the card. A judge was watching our game, so the judge was able to take the card that I drew, shuffled it into the deck, and it was no drama llama. So the judges were phenomenal the entire weekend. They were great. They put in a lot of long hours to make sure that all the games were fair. And also, it's a friendly reminder too, like if there is something that you and your opponent don't know or need to figure out, call a judge. Yeah, I feel like there's a very negative connotation with calling a judge. It doesn't have to be that way. There were plenty of judge calls because of something with the bag. We wanted to make sure something resolved in the order that they were supposed to resolve. So don't be afraid to call a judge at your next event. They are there to help you and make sure that the game proceeds for both players as normal. But Arthur was powerful because he hit like a truck. He was able to be hit by a truck. But the downside was the no more books ability. The good news is that I was able to pull off the Failing Arthur combo at least once. That is a pretty hard to answer. 6 strength is very hard to answer in this format, especially whenever you get later in the game. So effectively, if I was able to play Failing on 4, play Arthur on turn 5, Failing's resolving. If they can't answer Failing, if they can't answer Arthur, I am questing for a total of 6 that next turn. So Arthur was the gamble. I am glad he paid off. So getting into the 5-drops now, the Colonel, stat line. I feel like there is some other uninkable card I had inside his spot, but I needed a little bit more inkables. There were just simply not enough puppies in order for him to get his additional strength and lore. So he was just primarily ink, but a pretty good body if I could play him. Getting into more 5-drops, Lafayette, 7/4, Failing. The only reason why I ran these heavy hitting cards with lower willpower is because of Failing. I believe in the last match, I was able to play Failing on 4. I was able to drop Lafayette on turn 5, and my opponent didn't have an answer for Failing, and I think that's what ultimately happened. Is they're like, there's just no way they could stop it. There's no way they could stop Failing from questing. Now Lafayette does quest for 1, but again, helping resolve the Failing in this instance. Wasabi, primarily here for the stat line and the inkability status, questing for 2, which is okay. I feel like I maybe played him once. I think that was in one of the matches, or one of the rounds that I lost, where we ended up going on to game 3. So support was pretty cool here, again, to help do Failing. It sounds like a combo, but again, I was just looking at pure stat lines and also see how it can help resolve that Failing ability. Pluto, primarily questing for 2, decent body. Whenever he has no damage on him, he gets +2 strength and gains support. So he's a 4 or 7, and whenever he quests, he could simply pass that strength off to another character. Honest John was another really great card as well. I feel like Honest John came in clutch as well towards the end of one of the matches because I was, whoops. No, I do not want to enable dictation. Go away. Sorry. macOS problems, am I right? But Honest John here, 7-5, resolving Failing, questing for 2. I feel like I could take out almost anything with Honest John in play here. So again, just a high strength character to help Failing, but also questing for 2 and hits like a truck. I'm going to say this wrong, but Atiata, I suck at pronouncing some of these names. This here primarily for the stat line, but also questing for 3. I typically don't like to have more than 4 cards above 6 ink. And that includes 6. So what I did here is, I believe I did exactly 4. I did 1 Pluto at 6, 1 Honest John at 6, 1 Atiata, as what have you, at 7, and then Vincenzo, I cannot say these names, Santorini, one of my favorite characters from Atlantis, 2/8, questing for 3, but I just like things to blow up. He likes to blow stuff up in Atlantis, but whenever you play him, you deal 3 damage to chosen character. Phenomenal card, helped me answer evasives. Only got to play him once, but very strong card here, very strong card. So that's it for the characters. I had a total of, I believe, 38 characters. I typically try to have at least 30 characters. I try to keep no more than 10 non-characters in my deck, and I also try to keep it at no more than 8 uninkables. The last thing you want to do is end up in a situation where you can't ink anything, and also you don't want to end up in a situation where you're drawing too many items, actions, and songs. So a minimum of 30 characters is my golden rule, but in this case, I ran 38, and I ran 3 actions. Let's talk about those actions to round out our video. So Light the Fuse, deal 1 damage to chosen character for each exerted character you have in play. Removal is very hard in this set, so being able to play Light the Fuse on turn 2 or turn 3 to take something out was very valuable. If I had 3 characters exerted and I had the ink to play it, then I could deal 3 damage to whatever character. So this was pretty great, primarily for the removal aspect. Next up being Undermine, and keep in mind these actions also help trigger the Dawn Carnage here. So the Dawn Carnage being I play a action that isn't a song, I can give a character Reckless. So Light the Fuse is an action, Undermine is an action as well. So chosen opponent chooses and discards a card, but then chosen character gets +2 strength this turn. 1, obviously passing that strength on to another character, valuable, not only for challenging purposes, but also for Failing, having the strongest character in play, but also being able to have your opponent discard their only card in hand. Yeah, that's pretty valuable. So that was pretty awesome, pretty cool card, got to pull this off multiple times, in combination with the Dawn Carnage ability as well. Lastly is They Never Come Back. So it's an action, inkable, up to 2 chosen characters can't ready at the start of the next turn. This card was fantastic for a lot of reasons. Again, just like I mentioned previously, preventing your opponent from readying your characters is powerful. I was able to do that with Bruno. I'm able to do it too to 2 characters with They Never Come Back. So this was pretty critical because at one point in game 3, my first opponent, we were in our end of round procedures where we were going turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whoever had the highest lore total won. So being able to lock them up was valuable in those instances. So but also you draw a card as well. So card draw also a very valuable thing in limited. Most sealed limited formats, you will end up in a top deck situation, but being able to draw a card and prevent your opponents from readying 2 characters of your choice, yeah, that's pretty awesome. So all in all, very proud of not only my performance at Gen Con. It was a very long weekend. There's a lot of Lorcana to be played. I was exhausted by the end of it, but I do want to give a shout out to everyone that was at Gen Con. If we played that weekend and you're watching this video, thank you for being incredible. I don't think I encountered a single person who was toxic or negative. Truly everyone in the Lorcana space at Gen Con was just a phenomenal to be around and to play with. So good games all around, and yeah, it was fantastic. Was very, very happy to have pulled this off. I don't really make top cut a whole lot in the set championship, and I went to DLC Atlanta just to be there. I'm not a uber competitive player, but being able to pull something off like this was pretty cool, and it meant a lot, and I was very proud, and it was a very long weekend. But also, I do want to give a shout out to Nives Nerd Corner. Nives Nerd Corner, I have been a subscriber of Nives for a while. Nives puts out probably the best videos around new set releases in sealed and drafting guides. They go in and look at the data behind the set. Willpower per ink, lore per ink, strength per ink, how many inkables, how many invases, how many bodyguards. They break down the set, they identify some traps, and I remember watching this video before going into my Rain of Far Sealed event, and yeah, it was paramount. So if you're looking for pretty good data around a set whenever it comes to limited environments, then I would highly suggest checking out Nives Nerd Corner. They are listed inside the description below. So Nive, if you're watching, thank you for all the great content and for the guiding light inside sealed. So I take some inspiration from Nives as well as my own core fundamentals of sealed and applied them here at Gen Con. So, but folks, I think that does it. Again, it's been a few days since Gen Con now. I am exhausted. I still haven't completely unpacked. It's been a fun weekend, fun week, and was very happy to make this video and kind of highlight this in my Lorcana career. So if you are new here, you can see more of me over on the Ink Table Podcast YouTube channel, on Spotify, what have you. That is where me and my co-host Dylan, our producer John, we talk all things Lorcana, so we invite you to pull up a seat. Now, that being said, you won't find this content over on that channel, which is why you're seeing it here. Kind of an extension of the Ink Table Podcast, if you will. So, folks, let me know what you think inside the comments below. And who knows, I will see you over at the Ink Table and maybe inside a future video on the Preston McNair YouTube channel very soon. So, happy questing.